Ken, again, thank you for being here. I'm going to share some numbers that I found pretty, I guess impressive is the word to use. It said on average 260 home fires across the U.S. begin with Christmas trees each year, resulting in at least 12 deaths, and that's a U.S. number. And then additionally, there's 150 home fires, beginning with holiday lights and decorative lighting, causing another 8 deaths, and then just millions of dollars in property. So I say those figures not to scare anyone, but it just really raises the awareness that holiday safety is important.
It certainly is.
You just don't take it for granted, and I'm sure we're a lot safer in 2018 than we were in 2000 and 1980. But can you kind of describe, is it an issue here in Enid?
It's always an issue. It accelerates a little bit during the holiday season because we have a lot more heat sources with lights, Christmas lights and things like that generate heat, and they're usually in close proximity to things that can burn. So it's just kind of a common sense issue. When you put a tree in your living room and you put lights all over it, you've got a little bit more potential at that time to cause a fire if it's not done carefully. If it's a live tree or a cut Christmas tree, that's not watered properly, it gets dried out and it's exposed to heat sources, there's a good potential it's going to catch fire. And so candles, all of those things that we like to decorate with at the holiday season, we're sometimes putting them in close proximity to things that burns. And so the common sense thing is to be careful about how you do those things.
And I think sometimes we forget about our homes. The heaters have been running for a couple months and the air is dry. You feel dry on yourself, and then here you've got a tree. It's drying out as well. So
yeah, there are videos online from NFPA and some other sources that show burning Christmas trees and just how quickly it's like having a bomb in your living room when they catch fire if they're dry.
I can imagine. And you kind of mentioned Christmas lights. I love Christmas lights, so I put so many on my tree. But do you have any recommendations, like should you plug in 20 in a row, or should you keep them away?
So when your lights dimmed the other night, Erin flipped,
that was me.
she flipped the switch on, and yours went down a little
Griswold
bit.
turned her lights on.
Yeah, Erin Griswold, that's right.
Most of the Christmas lights that come in strings are designed to connect together, and you can have several in a row. But there's usually some labeling on the package that tells you how many that's rated for, and you don't want to overload the same circuit. So probably more than about 3 on the same string would be excessive. Plug those into separate sources if you can, or use a power strip if you got more strings of lights that you're going to connect that can handle that extra load of electricity. You don't have them all plugged into the same source of electricity to draw that extra current. So,
Ken, I want to blame my parents for this next statement. But as a kid growing up, I always heard the statement, turn the lights off. Turn the lights off, and especially when we were in the house, we had a light on a particular room, we would turn the light off. And so I think today, I'm one of those, I turn the lights off if I'm not in that room, but when I leave the house, when we leave the house, I pretty much make sure everything's unplugged, or the Christmas lights, or the lights are off. Is that kind of this old school mentality, or is that a safety feature that people ought to consider, say, when you leave the house, turn things off?
It is a good safety practice to turn lights off when you're not going to be around to monitor what's going on with them. Like I said, every one of those lights is a heat source. Some of the newer lights, the LED light strings, are much better they don't generate nearly as much heat as the old incandescent bulbs do, but we still have both of them around.
Yeah.
But if no one's around to keep an eye on that, no one's there to really enjoy the lights anyway. When you leave the room or you go to bed at night, you don't leave your tree lit all night if there's no one in there to kind of keep an eye on things, because all those are little tiny heat sources just looking for something to go wrong.
You notice how he said a common sense thing for the last 3 statements, so I think I'm getting that message, some common sense stuff.
This is not rocket science. It's pretty basic.
Okay.
And speaking of Christmas trees, do you have any recommendations on where people should put them in their homes or apartments?
Well, they're always next to a fireplace,
yeah,
right? That's the perfect spot.
Yeah, that's the perfect spot for it. You want them away from any other heat sources, or a heater or a furnace, at least 3 feet away from your fireplace at a very minimum. You're going to have gifts and packaging around that. That's all combustible stuff with gift wrap too. Make sure it's also away from those heat sources. And you also want them away from your traffic areas, so that you're not likely to bump into the tree, knock things over, cause problems with that. So,
sometimes there's certain gifts and decorations that are synonymous with Christmas, and one that comes to mind is Christmas candles. red, gold, glitter, whatever candles. Enid Fire Department's stance or recommendation regarding candles, and I know there's some common sense, with the candle, but they are very decorative, very attractive, but they can be kind of a heat source, right?
Well, so they certainly are. I mean, it's an open flame
Open
if you're
flame.
using a real candle. There's some really neat little LED candles out now for putting up on the mantle, and you don't really see the flame. You just see a little flicker. Gives you the same ambiance, the same kind of look, and a much safer battery-operated LED fixture. But an open flame, a real candle, does provide some warmth and provides, an atmosphere that people really enjoy in the holiday season. We certainly understand that. But once again, use common sense about where they are. Keep them away from things that burn. Christmas morning is a terrible time to have candles burning at all because gift wrap is going everywhere, So make sure all those are out. And also, the same with the lights, blow your candles out before you leave the room. Never leave a burning candle unattended where no one's around to keep an eye on it.
Before Aaron goes with the next question, I just had this thought. Christmas morning, wrapping paper everywhere. Your thoughts on throwing it in the fireplace? Good idea?
Bad idea.
Bad idea?
Bad idea.
But it's quick. It's easy, right?
It's quick. It's easy. But the oils and the inks and the different things on that paper produce toxic chemicals when they burn. So you're not just burning paper, you're burning all kinds of stuff. And so the odors from that are not good for you. And the ashes from that can also drift if you don't have spark arresters and things on your chimney to catch that stuff to prevent it from drifting away and landing in the dry leaves in the neighbor's yard and that sort of thing. So fireplaces are not trash disposal units. That you should never use it for that.
But they look great in the movies,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, I've been doing this wrong my whole life, is what I'm finding out right now.
Surely not.
So another thing, I don't know if you noticed it, but it is freezing in here. Steve likes it very cold.
It's chilly.
Oh,
Yes.
Well, it's December. Feels great.
My hands are turning blue, but it's okay.
So I was wondering, what is your thoughts or the fire department's thoughts on space heaters?
Space heaters are intended to supplement your regular heat. We have some homes in Enid where people, for one reason or another, they're not able to use the furnace or the appliance that was designed to heat the house. Maybe economic strains and that sort of thing. Paying the gas bill is a problem, so you're using electric portable space heaters instead. That's not what they're intended for. They're intended to kind of supplement in an area that, maybe you just can't get good airflow and it doesn't stay warm there. And once again, just making sure they're at least 3 feet away from anything that burns. Today's space heaters, the ones that you could go buy today at Walmart, are much safer than the ones you would buy 20 years ago. They have tip-over switches and safety factors built into them to kind of help with those issues. But they still are heat sources that we need to be careful about how they're being used. And you certainly don't want them on extension cords. They draw a lot of current. They're not designed to run on an extension cord, plug them directly into a wall outlet. So.
Our special guest today here on Good Morning Enid at 7:50 is the Fire Marshal from Enid Fire Department, Ken Helms. Ken, one more question before we break and do some more news and some weather and things like that. I noticed you brought a smoke detector. I believe that's a smoke detector.
This is a smoke detector.
And carbon monoxide detectors are just as important, perhaps? Or
Depending
what's
on the
the recommendation?
circumstances. Yeah. Well, carbon monoxide detectors are for any time you have an appliance that burns a fuel. If you've got a gas-fired appliance, or if you use propane, or if you're burning your fireplace, anytime something's burning, it's going to produce carbon monoxide. It's odorless, it's tasteless, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but it is a deadly toxic gas that if it's allowed to accumulate, you can have problems with it. So a carbon monoxide detector is important anytime you have a fuel-fired appliance or a fireplace of some kind. Smoke detectors, of course, are your watchdog when you're asleep to protect you and your family when you're asleep. The recommendations are to have one in every sleeping room of the house and also in your exit pathway from those sleeping rooms. So typical 3-bedroom house is going to have at least 4 of these. If you don't maintain them, if you don't make sure it's got a fresh battery in it and it's working properly and test it once in a while, it's not very decorative. It's not very useful at all unless it's doing its job. But they are very effective at keeping your family safe. They don't prevent fires. They help you recognize you have a fire early enough that you can get your family out of the house and make sure everyone survives. So.